all of us have our bucket list. We have places that we want to go. Maybe you've been to most of yours. Some of you might have already been to all of yours. You might have had a short list. Or maybe you had a long list and you have traveled. But we have places we'd like to go and see. I've got a longer list and probably I had years left. The world is that big and God has made that many beautiful things in it. And then there are different cultures and places and languages and peoples, all that kind of stuff. And I find all of that fascinating. I know I'm not going to make it. That's okay. I'm going to assume that at some point in the eternity we have coming, there's a highlight reel and I could catch back up. I don't know. But there are a few. One that's still left on for me on my list is the Grand Canyon. I've never been. I've never been to the Grand Canyon. I haven't been to the Tetons. I haven't been to any of that, Yellowstone, and I would love to go. Certainly, you hear over and over again by people who have finally gotten to go that when you stand at the edge of the Grand Canyon, it is a humbling moment. That makes sense. Again, I haven't been there, but this is what people tell me. It makes sense. I've been places that were a lot smaller than the Grand Canyon, and I have flown over it. I have actually seen it with my eyes, but an airplane view of the Grand Canyon isn't nearly as impressive. It gives you a false impression. It makes you small, or makes it small, and the Grand Canyon in reality makes you small. So it's backwards, right? I've flown over Mount Fuji in Japan and gotten to see that on a clear day. That's on my bucket list. I want to see Mount Fuji in Japan with my own eyes when the cherry blossoms are blooming and all of that stuff. And yes, I'm going to go eat sushi, all of that. But I want to see it. I've seen it from the plane. Not the sushi, but Mount Fuji. I see it when I would not eat plain sushi. That on the plane, this is not happening. But I've seen that out the window, and it was cool, and I got a picture on my phone. But it's not anything like standing before that mountain, I'm sure, and seeing the majesty of what God has created. Now, I have been some places that are on my bucket list. I've told y'all before, one of my favorite places on the planet we've been is Yosemite. I think it's absolutely beautiful. It does make How Great Thou Art get stuck in your head a whole lot, but it's not the only place. One of my favorites is Niagara Falls. So since I've been there, you get to go on the vacation photo there. Actually, I believe, yeah, that's probably a vacation. I was going to say, I have pictures of when we were moving here. We stopped at falls on the way here, but they were smaller than that. So anyway, Niagara Falls impresses me. It's just absolutely incredible. So if you go to the falls, or if you've been to the falls, then what you're going to see is a waterfall that is not even at, I want to say it's like 25%. Let's just, for the sake of me not remembering my math right, it could be 25 to 50%, throttled back so that the erosion doesn't just collapse the falls. Because on the American falls, that actually has collapsed before, and there are big chunks of rock at the bottom where that's happened. So they throttle it back to kind of preserve the landmark. Otherwise, nature would already have changed this falls dramatically over the last 100 years. If you let it go at its natural speed, there is so much in it when you're looking at it like this. You can't imagine it be twice or even 2/3 more or 3/4 more water going over the edge than there is. You let it go at full throttle, just as God intended. There is enough water going over the falls. 75,550 gallons, 75,550 per second goes over the falls. Now, Lake Brownwood holds a lot of water, 49 billion gallons of water. Did you know it was that much? I did homework this week. I didn't know either. What do you know? And then when I found that figure, I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. But I mean, a gallon's not very big, so I guess it makes sense. Covers a lot of area. So Lake Brownwood at its maximum capacity is about 49 billion gallons of water. It would take Niagara Falls 6.5 days to make a new Lake Brownwood. So think about that. Every 6.5 to 7 days, Niagara Falls pours enough water over for another Lake Brownwood. And Lake Brownwood every week. Every week. Every week. Not sitting still water. That's a new one. I don't even know where they put it. I have no idea where all of that goes. Actually, I do. But that's a big puddle, is it not? It just impresses me. But even standing out here at the edge, it is incredibly impressive. But I'll tell you where it gets really impressive is when you pay for the ticket to go on the Maid of the Mist. This is the old Maid of the Mist. They have a new electric one now that's very cool. The old one that thing would rattle and the engines would churn and it would just hold still at the foot of the falls, doing everything it could to stay in place and would hold you there for a long time. And you're looking up and it gets so much bigger when you're down in the boat watching that water come down than when you're at the top looking to fall. And you're sitting there and everything in that boat is fighting just to hold its spot. It's incredible. Absolutely incredible. And you cannot fathom that looking at pictures or looking at a video on the internet. Those things can be beautiful and impressive, but it is completely different when you're there, so to speak, face to face. And that's just something that God created. This is actually, in fact, these both things, the Grand Canyon, the Niagara Falls, these aren't even, I'm going to say this and you're going to think I'm wrong for a second. Just bear with me. Those aren't even things God created. Guess he did? No. Those are just the erosions that what he created brought about. You see what I'm getting at, right? This is not even, we look at that and go, wow, look at the majesty of God's creation. God's like, actually, that's just the crumbs that fell off my table. That's the dust, the water, just the stuff that's just wearing down. That's just the drool that runs off my chin. It was us. So what is his majesty? If these are just the things that are the result of what he created, and if what he created is just the Play-Doh he holds within his hands, how much power does God have? This is not even the biggest falls. This is not the greatest volume of water that flows in a river. And yet it's mind-blowing. And he's saying, yeah, but that's just a rain puddle for me. That's just a rain puddle. That is not, wow, look at what I did. That is actually a rain puddle. It causes us to do that. But by comparison, no. That then makes all those things even more mind-blowing. Because then you would stand at the edge of a canyon or at the foot of a mountain or at the edge of a falls and think, how great is my God that this is just his hobby. These are the side projects. You're the project. These are the side projects. How great is our God, and how important does he seem to think we are if these are the side projects and we're projects number one? Think about that for a second. It changes our perspective a little bit. But that's only one part of the equation. That's his power. That's his ability. That's his creativity. Okay, and that's the result of things that he's done. But then there's a relationship thing where we actually get to know Jesus, and we get to know God, and we get to know his heart. That's mind-blowing. Why would he want to get to know any of us? Why would he bother spending time with us when this is just his play puddle stuff? Who is man that he is mindful of him? That's what David asked. And you know why he asked. You kind of had to ask that question after a while. And yet he actually wants to get to know us. He wants to show us how to live. Jesus spends 3 years with those disciples, showing them day in, day out, here's how you live in the incredible majesty of God, so that we could live that better, so we could be more loving, so we could be more kind, so we could be more serving, so we could be more patient, more forgiving, so we could deal with life far better than we will just left to our own devices. Now, when I first started this sermon, the next slide was going to be different, okay? I was going to use a slide that brought in some basketball players. But some of you may know what happened last night, and I just didn't think I'd better bring it up. So I'm not going to bring that up. I'm not going to rub any of that in. I wouldn't be rubbing it in. I was rooting for the Spurs too. But I'm going to look down here out of habit, but y'all should see what's up here. That is so not a sermon. Anyway, I got these guys instead because it's baseball season, and everybody who plays baseball would like to play better, right? Just like we want to live better, we want to be better Christians, better disciples of Christ, better children of God. If you're a baseball player, a softball player, you want to be better, constantly improving, and you might have your heroes, okay? And maybe that is Babe Ruth, maybe that is Willie Mays or Hank Aaron. So imagine if you went out on your sandlot as a kid Everybody had one. Mine was not a sand lot. Mine was a red arroyo. But if you go red dirt, which, every now and then flash floods. So you go out there and you're going to play. Imagine you go out one day and you got these guys standing. Babe Ruth, Willie Mays, Hank Aaron. And they're standing there and they said, hey, we would like you guys to win this year. And we thought we would come and show you that you've got all of this in your pocket. It's going to happen. We'll give you a few pointers. We'll show you how it's done. And we're going to show you how to really play baseball. How would you feel about that if you were a 9, 10-year-old kid ready to go out playing Little League? Would that be cool? I think that would be pretty cool, Now, I didn't play baseball as a kid except for fun. I was at the beginning of, soccer came in. I only played it for a couple of years or a year. And the problem was our coach didn't know the game either. So, we didn't get that good. But our goalie was fantastic. The rest of the team, we were not worthy of our goalie. He was very good. But if we could have had some of those guys who were going to play over the next several weeks in the World Cup come and give us some pointers, we might have known what we were doing. We might have. And we'll talk about why it's bigger than that. Okay? So let's read the text, and we'll get this in our heads. After 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and his brother John, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. He was transfigured in front of them, and his face shone like the sun. His clothes became as white as the light. Luke says, brighter than any launderer could even get them. Bright as light. Suddenly, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, talking with them. And Peter said to Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you want, I will set up 3 shelters here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. And while he was speaking, suddenly a bright cloud covered them, and the voice of the Lord, a voice from the cloud said, This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. When the disciples heard this, they fell face down and were terrified. And Jesus came up, touched them, and said, Get up, don't be afraid. When they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus alone. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus commanded them, Don't tell anyone about the vision until the Son of Man is raised from the dead. So the disciples asked him, Why then do the scribes say that Elijah must come first? Elijah is coming, Jesus says, and will restore everything. But I tell you, Elijah has already come, and they didn't recognize it. On the contrary, they did whatever they pleased to him, and in the same way, the Son of Man is going to suffer at their hands. Then the disciples understood that he had spoken to them about John the Baptist. All right, we're going to leave aside the John the Baptist part. We kind of get that from what we talked about a few weeks ago. So let's look at what's going on here on this mountainside. You have Peter, James, and John going up with Jesus. They don't really know what they're going up for. It probably seemed to them like it was one more time where Jesus says, let's go up somewhere and pray. And that's probably what they expected. It was something that Jesus did with them regularly. And then all of this happens. And how do you even wrap your mind around what they saw? They go up there and they see Moses and Elijah, and Jesus is talking with them. And, I've joked about this before, but I really don't know except for what they were saying. I don't know how they knew who they were, except maybe Jesus said, Hey, Moses, hey, Elijah. I don't know. Maybe they knew by what they were saying. But somehow they know. Profit trading cards, mate. That's what I've always wondered. Since we're on baseball anyway, they might have well had playing cards. Anyway, they're talking with Jesus, and I don't know how much Peter, James, and John heard. We're not really told what they heard of that conversation, if they heard much of that conversation, but they know who they were, and they saw who they were. But even that's not the biggest deal. Jesus starts glowing, and I don't know. I've been to some places that are probably fairly toxic, but I yet to see anybody start glowing. And he glows just bright. It says brighter than light, the brightest light. Now, that's hard for us to kind of figure out, but I'm going to guess it's brighter than the high beams on a 2026 GMC. Those are ridiculous, right? You've had those in your eyeballs, and that's nothing by comparison. Nothing like an Air Force spotlight. Brighter than that. Brighter than going out and looking up at the sun. Don't do that. It's not good for you. But than going out and looking at the sun. And Jesus is just glowing. That's weird. Okay? I don't know what we would think about that if we saw it, but that's weird. And they had to take all of that in. What would it mean? I think for them, coming out of a very good knowledge of the Old Testament, which they did have, what's the most famous story of someone who encounters a light so great that it actually had to be hidden? Who was that? That was Moses. Who's there? Right? Moses on Sinai sees the glory of God. He doesn't see God's face. No one's done that and lived. But he sees the glory of God. And God's glory was so great, it almost sounds like what we would describe as radioactive. It's so great that Moses' face glows after that. And when he comes down with the law, he has to veil his face because the other people weren't prepared to see that. And Peter, James, and John are on the mountain, and they see what the people were not prepared to see. And how would you process that? Peter seems to get it. He's just made a confession. He knows he's the Son of God. He knows who he is. He said so. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Okay. Now what's he seen? Evidence. He has seen the glory of God, the glory of the only begotten Son. He will talk about this later in terms that are absolutely poetic. We beheld his glory. And Peter says, this is so cool. We got to do something about this, but we'll get there. We'll get there. First, let's go back and talk about transfiguration. So sometimes I think we confuse transfiguration with transformation, and they're not the same thing. Transformation is going from one thing to another. That's what up there. What is up there? You're changing from one form to another. A caterpillar to a butterfly. You are changing the outward appearance. It's still really the same insect, but the outward appearance has completely transformed into something else. It is a metamorphosis. Transfiguration is not a change. It's not a change. Transfiguration is a revelation of what was already there. Okay? It is the glory and the presence and the essence of the divinity of God that was always who Christ is, was, and ever will be. Jesus did not get an upgrade. He didn't change. He wasn't transformed. He didn't become glorious, become divine, or become the Son of God. He was and is and always will be. Where did I get that from? From the angels themselves who worship in his presence at the throne of God in Scripture. From Isaiah, from Revelation. These are quotes from Scripture. Jesus was and is and always will be. Not a change. And in part of the veil that he is pulling back for them to see is that I'm not becoming the he of God's kingdom. I'm not becoming the Son of God. I am. Jesus been dropping those hints all over the place. Before Abraham was, he said, I am. It's not good grammar, but it's good truth. He's trying to get us to see I've always been here. I've always been God. And they need to see this. They need to understand this. And you know what? I bet we do too. Peter then says, boy, it is good for us to be here. It's good for us to be able to see who you really are and know that it's not just, that I've been putting these things together and figured it out, but you are truly the Christ, the Son of the living God. It's good for us to be here. And we got to see Moses and we got to see Elijah. And don't you think Peter was a little bit of a chatty Cathy on the way down? Probably a little bit. But he says, this is so good. We've got to build, this says shelters, technically, right? We would, I think, better word is tabernacle. Some of your translations say that. We should build shrines. That might be more accurate. We should build shrines here to be a memory of what we just saw. We gotta, everybody who walks past here ought to know, right there was Moses, and right there was Jesus, and right there was Elijah, and we got to be eyewitnesses to his glory right here. Jesus said, I think you're missing the point. That's not what this is about. So much so that then later when all of this is recorded, They don't even tell us which mountain it is so that we can't go and finish what Peter was not supposed to start. So we don't even know exactly which mountain seems to be our first. But he's not raw. He gets what he needs to get. It's good to be in the presence of God. It's good to be in the presence of Jesus. Whether that's when we gather to worship, or when you're at your kitchen table praying, or when you're out mowing the lawn and praying. Yesterday was the weirdest thing. Landmarks and muscle memory and all that kind of stuff. I'm mowing the yard. You can tell because I'm sunburned, and I never ever remember to put on anything like that. Why would I? I'm so nice and dark. What would I need with sun stuff? I'm going around the yard, and there's a spot in my backyard that every time I'm mowing that spot, I remember the book 1776 by, I just lost his name, David, Somebody said it. I heard. McCullough. Yes, that's right. David McCullough, 1776, John Adams, great books. And I listened to the audiobook 1776 while I was doing yard work. And every time I come to a certain spot in the backyard, my brain triggers a part of the story of George Washington during the Revolution. I go to another part of the yard, and I had listened to a book that was a ministry-related book, a theological book. And every time I get to that part of the yard, I remember some of what that guy was talking about, and it reignites my thoughts and all of that kind of. It's so weird. So now, yesterday I didn't even listen to an audiobook. I just heard bits of books all the way around the yard. I've done it so many times. And then I go to the front yard and I'm mowing it. No, by then I was blowing it off, and I'm sitting there and I'm blowing things off. But I'm in the spot where I had been mowing when I was listening to a podcast by Carrie Newhoff by a guy who was a church planter who had some really awesome things to say, especially for works that are smaller, and which is 90% of churches in the world are 200 or smaller. And so he was giving some encouragement there. I didn't have to go back and read the books, listen to the podcasts or anything. I just walk around the yard now and I just hit those spots. It's the same thing here. You think Peter ever passed whatever mountain this was that we don't know the name of and didn't think of this moment and wasn't reminded of the glory of God and who Jesus really is? It became part of his muscle memory and part of his landmarks. I can't drive past Aggerly, Texas and not think about different moments in my life with my grandparents and that I was baptized there. I'll go by and drive by the building that I was baptized in just to bring back those memories. Why do we need to repeatedly go back into the presence of God? Whether that's in church, in prayer, in the Word, in conversations with one another, serving other people. Why does that need to become life and not just a thing we know in our head? Because it triggers all that muscle memory, spiritual muscle memory. It triggers those conversations with God before, and when we've heard him speak through his word before. So we keep coming back so that we're reminded. It's good to be in the presence of God. And God really is who he says he is, and Jesus really is the Son of God. I said that already. So I didn't need it. I already said it. There you go. Why was it good? I have made a list, so I will need to see this. Why is it good for them to be there? And I want you to put yourself in their place and why it might be good for you to be in God's presence. It was good because they saw that Jesus was more than they imagined. You know, it's cool to look at travel catalogs. It's cool to look at websites and videos about different places, but none of them are a replacement for standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon. None of them are a replacement for being in the valley at Yosemite. None of them are a replacement for going to the falls. None of them are a replacement for being in church with your brothers and sisters, worshiping God, praying together, and lifting each other up. It's just good to actually be in the presence because it's always more than what we thought it would be, greater than we thought it would be. It was good because they saw that the cross could not overshadow his glory. They may not have understood that in the moment, but in weeks they were very well understanding. There was nothing the Romans could do. There was nothing the Sanhedrin could do to him that would change what they saw on that knoll. Nothing. Nothing. They should not have been surprised at the resurrection. They shouldn't have been surprised that a stone could roll away when they had seen what they saw. And sometimes we struggle with the same thing. Things we should not have been surprised by that God has pulled us through and God has accomplished, and God has blessed us with. We should have known. That's all right. Don't beat yourself up. Learn for it and go on, or learn from it and go on. But remember, nothing overshadows the glory of Christ. The world will try, circumstances will cause you not to see things the way that you should. Your own inner self-talk will try to diminish sometimes the glory of God within you. They saw that, in truth, nothing can overcome the glory of Jesus Christ. Nothing can overcome what he really is and who he really is. And people kind of need to know that, what they were going to face. It was good because they saw that the law and the prophets find their fulfillment in Jesus. They had been told, and their people had been told, for hundreds of years, the Messiah will come. God does keep his promises. And at some of those times, they got pretty tired of waiting. You ever feel that way? You get up in the morning and go, Lord, it couldn't have been yesterday, last night while I was sleeping. Why couldn't you have come again already? We had the same thing. But you hold on. Because Moses and Elijah talking to Jesus on that mountain was proof God keeps his promises, because these were two of the men through whom many of those promises had been revealed. And they're talking with Jesus. All right, it's time. And they're not telling him. He's telling them. It's time. The Father has ordained it. And we're about to get this done. There will come a time. And the Father will tell him it is time. And he will come again. And no matter what happens between now and nothing can stop that God keeps his promises. And they got to see that and see proof of that. It was good because they would need this read later when Jesus was arrested, beaten, and crucified. They would need it later when Peter was arrested and beaten. And his tradition has it crucified. John would need it later when he sat on a little island that was basically a prison. No moment in any of those trials was Satan able to overcome who Jesus is, who Jesus was, and who Jesus will always be, and what that means for his people. John is on an island that is just a abandoned, horrible old rock. And what does he get to see? The whole vision of the book of Revelation. That whole vision was the glory of God that he'd see on that mountain in just a glimpse. And on that little rock, Jesus pulled the curtain back even further and said, don't you worry, John. You tell the people not to worry, because Christ has overcome the world. Incredible what they got to say. It was very good for them to be there. And then they get to share with us what they learned, because I'm going to go back to this statement, because Peter gets interrupted while he's saying, hey, let's build some tabernacles. And then he gets a voice saying, hey, maybe we do something bigger. This is my son, whom I love, in whom I am very well pleased. Listen to him. Listen to him. Can you imagine hearing the voice of God in a way so unmistakable? There's no question. What do you think this was, God, or do you think this was an angel? It's God. It says, the voice says, this is my son. The creator of heaven and earth says this. Whatever plans you had, when that voice breaks in, cancel them. You got something bigger on, right? So he interrupts him. Sometimes we need the same thing. We think we know what the kingdom should be, the church should be, our life should be, our worship should be, our this should be, all of that. We say, I'm going to do this and this and this and this and this. And we're so on fire for it because we're sure that that's the best thing in the world. And God says, hold on, wait a minute. I really just wanted you to listen to Jesus and follow him. I wanted you to be like my son. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't overprogram it. Don't overestimate your role in it. Just listen to. Where he sends you, go. What he gives you to speak, speak. What he wants you to do, do. And what he wants you to abandon, abandon it, and abandon it quick. Just listen. Just listen. Jesus will tell us how to live. He's shown us how to be. He says, I'm pleased with him. So are you going to do any better than that? Maybe just become one. Maybe his follower. Maybe just listen to. This is an important point. He calls us beyond awe and beyond admiration and beyond worship to actual discipleship. That listen to him will do that. It calls us beyond just, wow, Jesus is so good. That's necessary. He deserves our praise. He deserves our worship. He deserves our awe. But it calls us to something deeper. He calls us to actually love, work, serve, and be his disciples that actually become you. Y'all got a glimpse, didn't you? That's like you beheld the glory of the next slide. Did you see that? All right. I want us to get this first, though. For us, listening to him will not necessarily mean that we have to go to a cross, but we do have to take up our cross. We may never have to go and preach in Jerusalem and be slaughtered like some of them were. We may never have to go to a prison rock like John did. We may get to live a peaceful and quiet life in all godliness and holiness, which is actually what God wants for us. But to get there, some of these things are going to happen. And so we're going to listen to Jesus when he teaches us to forgive. That's not always easy, but it's always necessary. We're going to listen to Jesus when he tells us to deny ourselves. Maybe it's not what I want today. Maybe it's what other people need today. Maybe it's what God calls us to today. We listen to Jesus when he calls us to holiness, out of whatever sin or trap that we've been caught in, out of whatever selfishness is ruling our life, and into the holiness of an unselfish life that glorifies God. We listen to him when he sends us to love difficult people. That happens. You think when Paul gets the opportunity to preach to some of those guys while he was in prison, some of those Roman rulers and officials and governors, you think some of those people weren't obnoxious? Think our Roman governors not obnoxious? Oh my word, I can't imagine. You think current politicians are bad? Go to Rome, right? He went. He preached to difficult people. Sometimes they listened, sometimes they didn't. Sometimes they listened for a really long time, took up all of his spare time and energy, and then just sent him back to his cell. Gee, thanks. He did it anyway. He did what was faithful because it was faithful. He did what was right because it was right and because it honored God. We listen to Jesus when he says that the cross comes before the crown. We would really like our cross for our crown first, right? We would like that crown that we sing about. A mansion, a robe, and a crown. That's a great song. It's an old song. But, I've got a mansion, a robe, and a crown. Okay. And we would like that soon, not on layaway. But the cross comes first. The forgiveness comes first. The loving difficult people comes first. The overcoming our own ego comes first. All those things come first. But that doesn't mean the crown doesn't come. He revealed who he was so they would be able to know what you're about to go through is solid and worth it. And I really am the Son of God. You will not do this in vain. Your ministry, your work, your love, your labor is for a cause. And that cause is the glory of God that cannot be overcome.